Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is Journey into Mystery 87, cover dated December of 1962. The issue was written by Stan Lee and Larry Lieber, drawn by Jack Kirby, inked by Dick Ayers, and lettered by Art Simek. Our issue opens up with a striking splash page, showing our hero struggling against the electronic bonds of a Soviet soldier. But to understand how this has happened, we must first travel to the home of famous scientist John Blandings. It's there that his wife discovers a note he's left her. In it he renounces his loyalties to the United States and reveals that he's voluntarily fled to the Soviet Union. This shocking revelation quickly becomes a national headline picked up by TV news outlets. One of their broadcasts reveals that Blandings is now the fifth American scientist to suddenly defect in only the last month. A strange trend that's baffled government officials. Watching the jarring broadcast is the frail physician Donald Blake, who's secretly the hero Thor. He suspects that something's afoot with the scientist's defections and decides to contact his friend, an army colonel, to see if Thor can help get to the bottom of things. Thus Blake begins packing for a trip to Washington, D.C., where the colonel is stationed. Reminding him to pack his many medications is his nurse Jane Foster, whom he secretly loves. She shares feelings for him, but has mistaken his reserved nature for a lack of warmth and thus believes he could never be a romantic. While she keeps these feelings a secret, she's hardly shy about her infatuation with Thor, whom she's encountered several times before in this series. But the issue then shifts focus to a DC office, where Dr. Blake is meeting with his friend the Colonel. He tells him that he wants to set himself up as bait for the Soviets by claiming that he's invented a new biological weapon. But the colonel is rightfully worried about his friend's safety and thus questions why he'd propose such a dangerous plan. Blake obviously can't reveal that he's Thor, so he instead claims that he simply wants a chance to serve his country, especially after his disability kept him out of the Korean War. The colonel buys the answer and agrees to the plan. The issue then shifts forward sometime later as Dr. Blake kneels in a secluded alley. Away from prying eyes, he strikes his cane once on the ground to transform into Thor and then flies back to his New York office. It's there that he fabricates his fake weapon and leaks the news of its creation to the press. They in turn print it on a front-page headline, one which finds itself in the hands of a Soviet spy. But the issue then jumps forward to the next day, as Jane is letting a photographer into Dr. Blake's office. He's hoping to capture press photos of his weapon, which Blake allows him to. Yet as the photographer snaps his first photo, a mysterious gas begins leaking out of his camera. It reaches Dr. Blake, who is suddenly hypnotized by it. Thus we learn that the photographer is a Soviet spy and that the defecting scientists have all been hypnotically coerced into writing farewell notes and leaving for the Soviet Union. Dr. Blake isn't any different, as we soon see him board a waiting plane and embark for Russia. He arrives at a prison camp several hours later as his trance wears off. There he meets the other scientists who'd supposedly defected. They reveal that they've been abducted to perform scientific work for the Soviets, but have refused thus far. Yet the sanctions for their defiance have been getting harder, and they don't know how much longer they can hold out. Thus Blake knows it's time to change into Thor and free the men, yet he can't risk exposing his secret while they're so close to him. But he's just in luck, as it's then that their cell door opens and several guards begin ushering them out. Blake is the last to leave and finds an opportunity when the guards' backs are turned to transform into Thor. He then mightily whirls his hammer around and becomes a human cyclone, which produces powerful shockwaves that destroy his cell. Several guards of course notice this and prepare to fire at the hero. Yet before they can, Thor begins forcefully rubbing his hammer. The motion produces intense friction and thus glistening sparks, which are bright enough to temporarily blind the guards and allow him to escape. Yet as he's coursing the prison in search of the scientists, he accidentally trips a laser wire which activates a hidden trapdoor. Thus he's sent careening into a pit of man-eating sharks. Thor knows that he can't fight them all at once, so he instead begins spinning his hammer like he had in his cell. This time it creates a mighty whirlpool that disorients the sharks and gives him an opportunity to climb out of the pit. Thus he continues searching and eventually stumbles onto a Soviet with his hand on a lever. The soldier urges Thor to remain still, for if the hero takes another step, he'll pull the lever and collapse the entire prison, thus killing the scientists. Thor is then given the option to surrender, which he begrudgingly takes if it means saving them. The soldier thus orders Thor to drop his hammer and ushers him into a tight harness made of electronic chains, which even the god of thunder can't escape. Yet the Soviet then accidentally frees him, as he and several underlings leave to inform their superiors of his capture. They're of course gone for more than 60 seconds, triggering Thor's transformation back into Donald Blake. As the frail physician, the chains around him fit loosely and he simply slips through them. He then retrieves his hammer, transforms back into Thor, and sneaks away. Soon after, he finds where the scientists are being held and breaks them out. He then leads them through an underground escape tunnel that he carves with his hammer. Thus the scientists are free, but they notice that Dr. Blake is still missing. So Thor goes back into the prison to feign his alter ego's rescue. Inside he once again runs into the Soviets, who rush to pull the lever and sacrifice themselves to destroy Thor. Yet the hero saves them the trouble, as he stamps his hammer once on the ground to summon a powerful storm. Its strong winds and thunderous lightning reduce the prison to rubble. Surprisingly, the Soviets emerge from the ruins seemingly unscathed. While Thor could easily capture them, he decides to let them go, as he knows they'll be receiving enough punishment from their superiors. Thus he ceases the storm and rushes to reunite with the scientists as Dr. Blake. When he reaches them, they ask where Thor is, but he claims that he doesn't know, as the hero had simply taken off after saving him. Thus they're left to find their own way out of Russia, which they manage to do with the help of some sympathetic locals, who smuggle them onto a ship bound for America. The issue subsequently ends as we see Dr. Blake recounting his supposed rescue to an enamored Jane, who's predictably swooning over Thor. He desperately wants to reveal the truth to her and claim her love, but he's sworn to never do so, no matter how much it pains him. That concludes the Thor story and journey into Mystery 87 and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was a fairly average and unremarkable story. While the issue had some charm as a quaint and straightforward tale, it was also rather uneventful and ultimately forgettable. I would regard it as one of the series' weaker issues, although not necessarily a bad one. While it did not fail at anything it was trying to accomplish. What it was trying to accomplish was rather boring. But in any case, let me know what you thought of this issue and the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.